All right, my friend, I believe we are live. Welcome to Hemp Your Health. I'm Christy Thiel, Director of Education at Shady System, and your host. And today's show is really special. But first, Hemp Your Health is a show, an educational show for the health and hemp industry. And we bring on experts that share their intelligence, their wisdom, and their expertise for the betterment of humans, animals, plants, and the planet. And today's guest, this is our first show live on YouTube and our first show with an attorney, Alex Buscher. Alex Buscher is the founder and principal attorney of Buscher Law LLC, a firm focused on regulatory compliance, corporate law, food and drug law, and commercial transactions within the hemp industry. Current clients include cultivators, processors, retailers, exporters, investors, and retail product manufacturers. Alex has a wide array of regulatory, negotiation, and drafting experience through his work lobbying cannabis-related bills at Colorado State Capitol. Sitting on multiple state regulatory work groups, including Marijuana Sunset and the CHAMP Initiative, and formerly chairing the NCIA Hemp Committee. Alex earned his JD at Sturm College of Law at the University of Denver and his bachelor's in political science from Vanderbilt University. He has spoken at events nationwide, including NOCO Hemp Expo in Denver, Southern Hemp Expo, Hemp on the Bayou in New Orleans, and NCIA Northeast Business Conference in Boston. He is also a fluent in music and plays the keyboards, drums, bass, and guitar. Boom, boom, boom. Welcome, Alex. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Christy. It's so great to be here. Really look forward to our conversation this morning.
Me too. So let's dig right in because we are now in a new Wild West within the hemp industry. And this wildfire is involving Delta 8. So to get everyone on the same page, would you please start with what is Delta 8 and Delta 10?
Sure. So this issue really started popping up over the last 12 to 18 months as the price of CBD crashed and the price of biomass crashed in general. And people were looking for an alternative cannabinoid that brought in more money, but also was beneficial to the consumer. Or provided some effect to the consumer. So Delta 8 is an isomer of CBD and also of Delta 9 THC. So Delta 8 is not, there's not a lot of Delta 8 that actually is naturally occurring on the cannabis plant out in the field, but you can isomerize CBD isolate into Delta 8 THC. And it changes the structure of the cannabinoids so that some people claim there is some sort of euphoric effect. So there are people that say Delta 8 gets you high. There are people that say it does not. I'm not an expert on the effects of Delta 8, but what I will say is the Farm Bill was very clear in its definition of hemp, and that included any isomers, derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids derived from the hemp plant, which was defined as a cannabis plant containing less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC. So as long as the source plant contains less than Delta 9 THC, and that includes THCA times 0.877 because the Farm Bill included a decarboxylation measure. So as long as your source plant contains less than 0.3% total THC, any derivatives from that plant are then legal as long as they also contain less than that 0.3% Delta 9 THC. And the Farm Bill very specifically says Delta 9. So the DEA came out and said, because Delta 8 doesn't grow on the plant and it has to be made in a lab or converted or isomerized in a lab, it's therefore synthetic. And the problem with that is that the Farm Bill never said natural derivation or synthetic derivation. It said anything derived from the hemp plant, it qualifies as hemp. and it's no longer Schedule 1. So the DEA is overstepping here, but they're trying to put the cat back in the bag as much as they can, because the Farm Bill legalized every cannabinoid except for Delta-9 THC and Delta-9 THCA because of the decarboxylation measure.
Man, so I think that's good for all the people that are pro Delta 8. We have this really protected loophole that even if it is considered synthetic, it still comes from the hemp plant. And that way it's absolutely considered, I think, can I quote you, every day through Sunday legal?
So I will say that the DEA raids first and then they fight in court later. So there are pending court cases on this rule, which hopefully will be resolved in the next year or so. But until that rule by the DEA is struck down, there's a risk of enforcement. You have a really good argument on the back end that what you were doing was legal because it was legalized in the Farm Bill, very clearly legalized. But it would still, your company would still have to go to great expense to defend that lawsuit against DEA. And if you had an unfavorable judge, who knows what the lower court, the ruling could be, you could have to appeal it. So there is no certainty in law. But what I will say is the plain reading of the definition of hemp in the Farm Bill, plus the continued letters from Congress describing the intent of the Farm Bill, has very clearly, in my mind, made it so that Delta-8 is a legalized cannabinoid as long as it's lawfully hemp derived.
So would you have to prove with the COA or something that it does come from hemp to avoid
Yes.
being rated if you have it in a retail space?
So if you have it in a if you have it in a retail space, that's probably the most risky, because not only do you have to worry about the federal enforcement, you have to worry about state enforcement. And in a lot of states, they actually have all tetrahydrocannabinols scheduled, and they haven't exempted all tetrahydrocannabinols from hemp from their Controlled Substances Act, the same way that tetrahydrocannabinols from hemp were exempted from the Federal Controlled Substances Act. So it's really state by state dependent. And in a lot of states, it's still very illegal to have Delta-8. So if you're selling Delta-8, it would essentially be selling a Schedule 1 substance like marijuana. And in some cases, because it's an extract and a derivative, it would be escalated as a hashish violation, which would be a first possession, first sale felony. So Delta-8 is very risky. I'm not saying it's not without risk. I'm saying on the federal level, we legalized it through the Farm Bill. The DEA has tried to put the cat back in the bag, but I believe that their rule is going to be struck down in court. But on the state level, it's a whole different ballgame. If your state still has tetrahydrocannabinols as Schedule 1, then it is a Schedule 1 substance, and you could be jailed for selling marijuana or hashish if you're selling Delta-8.
So Colorado, obviously we're legal here on the THC side, but Delta-8 is illegal in Colorado?
So there's a question about that too. Colorado is one of the states that has tetrahydrocannabinols separately scheduled, but because we have a constitutional definition of hemp, which includes extracts and derivatives, you could make the same argument for Colorado about Delta-8 as you could in another state. Again, gray area, or as you can on the federal level. Again, in Colorado, very much a gray area. I have not seen enforcement yet, and I haven't seen a case to solidify the law in Colorado yet. But in other states, like for example in Idaho, it's very clear that if you sell Delta-8, you're selling hashish, and it's a first possession felony. Period. The end. There's no argument.
So in states there where the gray area is definitely gray, the maybe worst case scenarios, they get raided and the product would get confiscated, but they'd be okay as far as not getting a fine or something like that.
I mean, initially they could get a fine. They would then have to fight. They would have to fight the fines in court. They'd have to fight law enforcement in court. So, like I said, there is a significant risk to selling Delta-8. That being said, federally, it's legal. So, or I believe it's legal. And again, it's so new, and with everything in the hemp industry, it's awaiting a lawsuit or awaiting a court decision or awaiting Congress to act. Because, for example, we still can't put CBD itself in food or dietary supplement products. And that is an issue that was left over from 2018 when they said the FDA maintains its jurisdiction over food and cosmetic or food, drug, and cosmetic products, even in light of the 2018 Farm Bill. And we're in 2021, it still hasn't been resolved. So, as with everything in this industry, there's definitely a risk. And I would say that Delta 8 is the riskiest area of the hemp industry right now, because the DEA is saying Congress is wrong and synthetic cannabinoids are still scheduled. Congress is saying, no, we descheduled. There's a court case ongoing. But also you have that state level issue where even cannabis and marijuana favorable states could see Delta 8 as essentially selling a Schedule 1 substance. So it's really important you understand the laws of your state before you go into Delta 8.
And maybe think once, twice, three times about putting this in a retail store. Would
Right.
it be safer to sell online in a WooCommerce versus retail brick and mortar?
I mean, the penalties would be the same, because if you're sending it into a state, you're still selling an illegal substance in the state, but the likeliness of being found is diminished. But that being said, make sure before you sell something into a state, that it's legal to sell it into that state, because the last thing you want is a controlled substances violation. And although it might be legal in the state you're selling out of, and your state probably won't extradite you for violating the other state's laws because you're doing something legal in your state, if you ever travel to that other state, you could be arrested. So, and your business could face fines and sanctions. So there are serious consequences to breaking state laws, even via e-commerce. So it's really important to know the law. And on e-commerce, just going off this really fast, California has Proposition 65, which requires labeling of all products which create reproductive harm or a chance of cancer. THC is now designated as a reproductive harm substance in California. So anything, even including trace THC, has to be labeled with that Prop 65 warning. And there are attorneys in California going around and trying to find companies that are non-compliant with this Prop 65 labeling and then sue them in class action lawsuits. So it's really important that you know the laws of the states when you're sending products into that state. And Delta 8, for example, right now off the cuff, I don't know if California limited their reproductive harm to just Delta 9 or to all tetrahydrocannabinol. So that would be something I would need to look into. But regardless, if you have even trace THC, and as we know, a lot of tests aren't very specific. So sometimes CBD and other cannabinoids pop as THC. Even then, you could have a lawsuit on your hands because they're saying, "Oh, you have THC in your product. You don't have this correct labeling under California law. Your business has broken the law, and you owe us, X amount of dollars." So, in fines. So e-commerce, though you're less likely to be enforced on, because all your products aren't in one place, it's easier to get in trouble because you're selling into a lot more states and there's a lot more risk of breaking state law. So that's my number one piece of advice is before you send anything out of state or into another state, make sure it's legal in that state.
Yeah, and so any full spectrum technically should have a Prop 65 warning on it if it's going to be sold in any capacity in California.
Correct. And even if it's offered online in California, I would have it on your website, because you just don't want attorneys going after your company just because of a technicality.
No,
I mean, and the warning is important. I think that when it is applied to CBD products, which contain trace THC, it's ridiculous, but that's where we're at. And California's decided that. And until there's a change, companies could be liable for a lot of money in California.
Well, it's easy to put a Prop 65 warning on a website and cover your butt than try to get out of the legal battle. So
exactly.
I think incredible advice. Do you know anything about Delta 8 and testing positive on a drug test for THC?
I don't, but I will say, and again, just as a disclaimer today, none of this is legal advice. This is just informational purposes. I obviously don't know my audience in this format, so not creating any attorney-client relationships today. If you would like to, please reach out, but just need to add that disclaimer. What I will say is almost every cannabinoid, from what I understand, can trip some tests for cannabinoids or for THC. And some tests aren't even specific to THC, they're specific to cannabinoids, from my understanding, and that my understanding is limited here. So what I tell people is the best way to go about it is to assume that your client or your customer is going to pop hot on a drug test. And because of that, adding warnings to your website and to your labels saying, although this product contains less than 0.3% and is Farm Bill compliant, we do not guarantee that you will not, fail a drug test, or your similar language. I've got specific language that I use, but very similar disclaimer language like that, saying we're not guaranteeing that this product is THC free and you won't fail a drug test, because the back end of that looks like your customer buys a CBD product that says THC free, or it doesn't say anything about THC on it. And they take it thinking, okay, there's no THC, I'm not going to fail a drug test. They get a random drug test, they lose their job, and now they sue your company because they lost their job because you said, or you didn't not say that, you didn't disclaim that your product could have THC in it or could make them fail a drug test. So adding warnings like that to limit your liability, and I know this is very lawyerly and getting into the weeds here, but just making sure that when your customers buy your product, they are fully informed of any repercussions they could face is really important. So before, if you have medical conditions, please consult a doctor. Don't use this, for adjustable products, don't use this if under 18 or 21. That's the company's call. There's no age limit in the Farm Bill, but you don't want a situation where a 14-year-old kid has bought your product online, they're using it, their parents freak out because now that you've sold their kid cannabinoids, they don't know the difference. And now they're suing your company because you sold their 14-year-old kid cannabinoids. It just certain things like that limit the liability on the backside for the company. And it's really easy to do up front. And it makes a world of difference both to the consumer, because now they're fully informed, but also to your company, because now you're not going to face lawsuits for, a consumer losing their job, or a consumer, a 14-year-old parents suing you because they bought their product on your website without any legal disclaimer. So
especially if those parents are super paranoid and they take their kid and have them drug tested. God forbid, it seems so extreme, but let's say they do.
Right.
And worst case scenario, and he or she tests positive, and then it's their word against ours. And so that's great, because I've always been curious, since CBD is not like an 18 or older, 21 and older, regulated, but a lot of hemp companies put, are you 18 or 21 years of age or older? And then you have to click that yes box to go into their site.
Correct.
They're just covering their butts.
Yeah, and for anything smokable, because the FDA raised tobacco to 21, anything smokable needs to be 21. Vape, smokable, anything should have a disclaimer of 21 on the website. Again, not legal advice, just saying we've come to the point in society where things that are smoked by people 21 and older, and hemp does not want to be the one industry rebuffing that, because the FDA will absolutely go after the industry.
It's good for us in the hemp industry to stay under the radar and not draw unnecessary attention to ourselves. And
self-regulate. If the government's not going to regulate in a reasonable fashion, because the hemp rules, while better, especially the FDA rules, which haven't even come out yet, that the USDA hemp rules, while better, there's still issues where processing isn't fully legal, because during processing it spikes. So it has to spike. When you're removing water weight and plant matter, your THC concentration goes up. It's just it's impossible for it not to. So if the government's not going to regulate us in a way that's actually real and give us a full framework, we have to do it ourselves. Because if we don't, the industry is going to get a bad rap, and we're going to face really strict regulation that the industry doesn't want to see.
No, we've come too far to take 10 steps back. We need to keep going forward. This is good. This is great. So I actually cannot see any of the questions on the YouTube. So if you are posting questions, I can't see them. So we will go back and answer them to the best of our ability. I just wanted you to know, to our listeners, I'm not ignoring you. I just can't see the questions for some reason. So we'll get that figured out. All right, let's dig into white and private label and compliance around labeling. Let's start with the consumer. How can a consumer identify those shady business practices and false labeling in products?
So for the consumer, anytime you see medical claims being made, that's a red flag, because at this point, it's very, very clear that you cannot make a medical claim about a food or a dietary supplement product or a cosmetic product. Dietary supplement products actually currently can't have any hemp ingredient in them at all under federal law, because no NDI has been filed and because of the drug exclusion in USC 21 USC 321 FF. And that's essentially says that since Epidiolex is a drug, and that study was made public and now it's actually in commerce, you cannot add specifically CBD to a food or dietary supplement product. And for dietary supplement products, before you put anything in a dietary supplement product, you have to file an NDI. So no NDI has been filed for either hemp extracts or hemp seed oils or anything like that. The FDA did come out and say that hemp seed oil is grass, generally recognized as safe and can be in food products. But the real issue is if you're seeing any medical claims being made, that company is knowingly breaking the law, because or they're not caring enough to find out. Because at this point, the last 2 years, every conference you've gone to, people say no medical claims, and you can't say, oh my, the spectrum is, you can't say my product cures cancer, but you also say my product helps you fall asleep, because that's a structure function claim. You can't say that your product will affect people in a way that you have not proven scientifically. And because the FDA doesn't recognize any CBD or any hemp product as a dietary supplement product, you can't make structure function claims anyway. So any claim that you see or any product that has a claim is violating federal law, period, the end. So that is one way to weed out companies. If they're making claims, they're violating federal law. So if they're violating claims, what's to say, they're manufacturing using GMP practices, that they're operating above board, that their hemp really came from that organic farm that they're claiming it came from. So it's really important to do your due diligence and looking at research, looking at reviews, not just one review, because a lot of companies put out their own reviews, their own websites saying our stuff's the best. Make sure you they do. Make sure you go and do the research. And the other thing is, a trade group stamp of approval is good, but at the same time, a lot of those companies are paying to be a part of the trade group. Yes. So even though it has that trade group stamp of approval, still do your due diligence, because they're paying in some respect for that stamp of approval. The COA is really the most important aspect, and finding the legitimate COA is hard, but you need to ask the company or look on their website. At this point, most companies will have a batch label, so they'll have a batch ID which says this batch came from, was made on this date. This is the batch number. And then you can go onto their website and search that batch number and find the COA that's related to your product. And if that COA, shows high CBD, low THC, your total THC below 0.3%, some other minor cannabinoids, that's showing you have at least the amount of CBD that they're claiming in the product, as long as they then take that extract and they put the right amount in your product, or you have the COA for the final product itself. But really, it's still hard. I mean, you're looking at reputational online reviews. You're looking at anecdotal reviews. So finding companies that, one, don't make claims, two, they're labeling and they have disclaimers like, the Indiana correct disclaimers, contains less than 0.3% THC. And then you have your disclaimers about either drug testing or consult a doctor before use. Those are really important because that shows that the company cares enough about its own liability that it's going to the mat to protect itself, but also protect you likely. So, like I said, I don't give any recommendations. It's hard for me to give recommendations because I can't be in the companies looking at the processes, making sure that their hemp is from the US and not coming from overseas where it may have been grown in soil that is contaminated with lead or pesticides or arsenic. I mean, it's really hard. So, doing your due diligence, looking at reputations, looking at reviews, that's really all you can do.
That is great information. And what's so confusing too is I was walking around NOCO last weekend, and there's so many CBD supplements now, like CBDs in mushroom formulations with cordyceps and immune boosting formulas. So even though it's illegal, it's still happening. It doesn't mean those are bad companies. It just means that this gray area is getting a little bit broader. And what do you think is going to happen as far as the supplement industry? What will CBD ever be considered a dietary supplement? Or do you think it'll go straight to food?
So I honestly don't know. I mean, I think that eventually it will become a dietary supplement because both FDA and Congress have acknowledged that's where it should be in terms of marketing the CBD molecule. If it's going to be allowed at all, it should be a dietary supplement. The other side of the question is regarding food. And food right now, there are arguments that you can make a legal product containing CBD as a food product. If you market it as a CBD product, it's unlawful. You're violating the law. If you add CBD isolate, you're clearly violating the law. If you add hemp extract, full spectrum hemp extract with it, which includes multiple different cannabinoids and also naturally includes CBD, I don't see how that's different from red rice yeast or soy, because in both those cases, red rice yeast statins are derived from that and sold as drugs. But red rice yeast is both a dietary supplement and a food. They can't market red rice yeast as a statin. That's the clear delineation. So one, you can't market the product as a CBD product. It would be a full spectrum hemp extract product. And two, as a food. As a food, not a dietary supplement. Because again, to be a dietary supplement, you have to submit an NDI. So one, you can't market it. And then two, it has to be a full spectrum hemp extract, because if you put isolate in, there's no question that you've added CBD directly to your product to create a CBD product. So again, this is a gray area argument, but I believe it's a legitimate argument with precedent and law. For example, the Pharmanex case. So right now, I do believe there are ways to label compliantly. Do I think CBD in the future will be able to be marketed as a dietary supplement? Yes, but at what amounts? I'm not sure. There will probably be regulations around How much you can put per, per pill, per bottle. We're not there yet. I know I've seen a few proposals, but the science isn't even fully there yet. I mean, we're still trying to figure out how this is affecting our bodies. And, with CBD and THC, there's a lot of studies, but we're seeing, for example, Delta 8. There's anecdotal evidence that Delta 8 gets you high and Delta 8 doesn't do anything, and Delta 8 just makes you sleepy, but Delta 8 also makes you energetic. So I don't know what to believe.
I've taken Delta 8 3 times, and all 3 times it affected me very differently. And
Really?
so I don't know if it was the how it was made, or how much I took, or just the environment I was in, but it was definitely psychotropic. It wasn't so intoxicating, but it definitely was psychotropic. I more so than the CBD. So this is like, oh, there's a spider coming down by me. So I hope everyone that is listening is thinking, because we will get to Alex Buscher's contacts, but I hope you're all taking this really seriously and thinking, I need an attorney on my team, because it wouldn't take much to get into trouble, because there are so many drinks and foods and supplements now that have CBD in them. And if you're riding that line, you need to figure out and get a legal team like Alex behind you, because there's too much gray area. It doesn't mean you're safe. It just means that you're still in the gray area. And if you're closer on that illegal side, you need to back yourself up now, because we never know when this sledgehammer is going to come down. And
I do want to say, I don't want to demonize dietary supplement companies, because there's a lot of great companies that are labeling as dietary supplements. So that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is, right now, there's an argument that you can label compliantly as a food, but there's no argument for dietary supplement. The dietary supplement companies are waiting because they have been essentially told by both the FDA and Congress that eventually CBD will be able to be a dietary supplement. It's just right now, it's still a violation of the law. So I'm not, just because a company labels as a dietary supplement, don't avoid that company. I'm just saying that as a company, you can make a decision to label compliantly under the law as currently written, versus waiting and seeing if FDA will actually label this or allow this as a dietary supplement in the future. So that's my point. And for consumers, like I said, it's really about reputation. American companies, if a lot of times, if you look around locally and support local companies, a lot of times there's some really great local hemp companies in your backyard if you're in a legal hemp state. But at the same time, you got to do your due diligence, because there are also a lot of shady companies that are operating out of their garage. They're not careful with how they mix their product. They don't really care where their hemp comes from. They're certainly not testing their product afterwards to make sure that it has 200 milligrams of CBD in it. You could have 5 or it could have 500. I mean, I believe there was an investigation in Florida done where the range of CBD in the products claims went from like 1% of claimed value to like 1,000% of claimed value. So making sure that your local company, is operating correctly and getting good quality hemp and good quality processed goods is super important. But I just want to make that clear, not demonizing companies just for labeling as dietary supplement.
no, I appreciate that clarification, because it's important. And so if someone's going to go to the food side, they want to put CBD in there, it'd be safer at this point to use a full spectrum than an isolate too.
Correct. If you use an isolate, there's really no argument that it's legal, because Epidiolex is essentially an isolate product. So you're using their drug product in your food product, and that although there could be a exclusion in the future if the FDA decides to issue one, or there could be an argument that it was already in use in the past. I find that argument specifically hard to make, because although there's evidence of hemp derivatives in ethanol from back in the day, before the Controlled Substances Act, before we made marijuana illegal, there's very clear, there were tinctures containing cannabis in ethanol, extracted, hemp extract, cannabis extract, whatever you want to call it, it was in our food system. CBD isolate, that's not the case. There was no isolated CBD back in the late 1800s or early 1900s. So that argument doesn't work. So if you're going the food route, it's really a full spectrum route.
That's really good advice. So on the topic of isolates versus full spectrum, can we touch briefly on THC edibles? Because that's gone from a $1 billion industry in 2017, and it's predicted to jump to 4.1 billion by 2022. What could potentially interrupt or threaten that growth curve for THC edibles?
Sure. Well, one of the reasons that I'm a hemp attorney and I focus specifically on federal law right now and trying to get, I focus on a lot of areas, but my real focus right now is federal law and trying to make sure that CBD is allowed in food and dietary supplement products is because the same argument for CBD, because it's an Epidiolex, it can't be in a food or dietary supplement product, applies to THC. Because THC is in drobenol, which is synthetic, or Sativex, which is organic. They've got both their bases covered now. Because that has been made public, THC can no longer be in food and dietary supplement products. So even after we legalize, knock on wood, even after we legalize marijuana on the federal level, you're still going to have the same issue where the FDA is going to say, oh, it's legal, but not in food or dietary supplement products. They might allow it in cosmetics like they're doing with CBD now. But until we have the drug exclusion issue figured out, THC will have the exact same issue as CBD, and that once we legalize federally, it's not allowed to be a food or dietary supplement product. And in Colorado, we actually don't call edibles foods. We call them edibles, even under the law. And that allows CDPHE, which is our health department, to ignore it. And it's great for everybody because the med gets to regulate edibles and CDPHE gets to throw their hands up and say, we don't touch marijuana. And that's how it's regulated. So that's really why I focus so heavily on hemp and specifically CBD at the federal level, is because the same argument is going to apply to THC as soon as we legalize THC. And if anybody is listening, if you legalize marijuana, it would be super helpful to provide a directive to the FDA that marijuana is allowed in food and dietary supplement products in the law, because then they have to act. And that was not provided to FDA in the Farm Bill. And so we're seeing this back and forth where they said it'll take them 5 years to regulate, and Congress said that's not acceptable. And FDA said, well, then provide us a law. So I'm asking whoever is out there listening that has any influence, we want to make sure that when marijuana is descheduled, it's also clearly and expressly allowed in food and dietary supplement products.
Thank you. All right, listeners, keep that in your front pocket now. All right, to wrap up, we have so many more topics to go through. Is there anything you want to specifically touch on within the hemp industry, whether it's other uses for cannabinoids, or what will happen to the hemp industry if marijuana does become federally legal, or where is the hemp industry going? Where do you want? This is
So,
all. Yes.
I think we've talked a lot about where the hemp industry is going, especially on the cannabinoid side, and it's really pending regulation and pending some direction from the Biden administration. Obviously, he's more friendly, it appears, than the previous administration, but he did just fire 4 staffers for marijuana use, for admitted marijuana use in their past, not current marijuana use, but they admitted that they used marijuana in the past and they were fired for it. Even though they were promised, I believe, from what I heard, that past marijuana use would not disqualify them from the job. So really, we need some movement on the federal side of marijuana, and also the federal side regarding CBD being in food and dietary supplement products. What I really would love to discuss is the other side of the hemp industry, which is the industrial hemp side product, plastic, paper, biofuel, biodiesel. That side has not evolved really at all in the last few years. There's a few companies out there making cool products like I believe Hemp Wood Floors, I think is a company in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I also saw a few, 4 or 5 years ago that there was a company trying to make an airplane out of hemp up in Canada. But after legalization, everybody essentially jumped into CBD and then CBG and then Delta 8 and now Delta 10. And I think, whatever cannabinoid comes next, everybody's going to jump into that. But I do think there's a large opportunity on the consumer packaging side where we see tons of waste in the marijuana industry, plastic waste, because of regulations and also because of branding. So if people can create hemp, and this isn't just limited to the marijuana industry, but it's an example. But if people can create hemp paper and hemp cardboard that is, using the waste of all of the plant material that we have on hand to then create sustainable materials that we can reuse and recycle or biodegrade or compost, which would actually even be better. That's really where I see the opportunity in the industry, and I see very little investment on that side. So bioplastics. I mean, I keep hearing people talking about, hemp's going to replace plastic bottles for Pepsi and Coke. Well, I still haven't seen a clear plastic hemp bottle. Like if anybody out there has one or has made one or knows of one, please send it to me, because I still have not seen one that's 100% hemp. And then the next hurdle is, even if it is 100% hemp, is it biodegradable? So, do you have to heat it up? Is it compostable? There are a lot of issues to figure out, but whoever figures that out can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you see, on the paper side, you see business cards, you see promo material, but we have a lot of waste hemp just sitting around that isn't being used. And, I'm not a scientist, but could we make copy paper with that? Potentially, that could be $1 billion business. So I'm just throwing things out there because there are still opportunities in hemp, and it's not all on the cannabinoid side. The cannabinoid side is an opportunity, but it's heavily saturated and everybody's vying for the same market share. So it's kind of a zero-sum game. On the other side of the industry, you have a wide open field and the sky's the limit. And I'm just highly encourage people to go into that side of the industry because it's also fully legal. There's no question about the FDA. There's no question about the DEA. The hemp was grown legally. It's a hemp plant. It's not going to be eaten or smoked. So you don't have to worry about it. And it's just nobody's over there. And it's frustrating, but that's my final plea is somebody get on the industrial hemp side of things.
I would love to see that. And hopefully we have those people that are planning this, because just the amount of carbon sequestering, having more truly industrial hemp grown or even as a ground cover, and just the contracts that would be available if we can get the right equipment in for the paper, for the fabrics, for the plastics, like you were saying. At NOCO, they had a hemp car. That was really cool.
That's cool.
But you're absolutely right. This industry is this big, and the cannabinoid industry is this big. The industrial hemp industry can be gigantic, so huge. We need something desperately that will replace all these toxins. I was on the beach 2 weeks ago. Plastic everywhere. Plastic all over the beach. And if it's on the beach, and we know how much is in the water. So we need to take, a lot of people need to take action quickly. And it's safer. I think industrial farming for hemp is safer, of course, than the short plants that could test hot really quickly. And you just have different genetics that also seem a little safer too for the farmer security.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I'm just dumbfounded every day that goes by that this industry isn't built out, because I think that was really one of the biggest arguments for legalization, was for replacing consumer products with more sustainable materials. And it just hasn't happened. And I think COVID to some degree may have gotten in the way, but really, I just think everybody wanted to jump in on the cannabinoid side of things, because that's where the quick route to cash was with the lowest cost of lowest initial investment, because on the industrial side, a lot of these processes don't exist. So it's a large R&D push, and it's a large initial cost of investment to get it off the ground. It's understandable, but at the same time, infuriating.
I couldn't agree more. And even we didn't even touch on animal feed and animal bedding and all. That is a huge industry too, and we need to get away from the toxins with the animals also. What is your website?
So my website is buscherlaw.com, BUSCHER law.com.
You guys check his website out. It is a wealth of information. Your website's beautiful. I go to it, I reference it, I share it with our accounts. It's really good. I can't recommend, you're welcome. Can't recommend enough to get a hold of Alex. Everyone needs him, an attorney that specializes in the hemp industry, on their team. It's so easy. I hope you guys were hearing how easy it is to make a mistake innocently. You need to have legal advice if you're going to get into this space. And there's no one better than Alex Buscher. He holds your hand. He knows it from top to bottom, inside and out. And he could save you potentially your business, a lot of money, and a bad reputation. What is the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way is just to email me, alex@buscherlaw.com.
Excellent.
Simple. Yeah.
Everyone on Hemp Your Health, if you have show ideas or show suggestions, I'm all ears. If you'd like to make introductions for a show guest, please get a hold of me, Christy@cjsystem.com. Stay tuned, tune into Facebook and our website. We're going to have a really amazing April 1st, Fool's Day. Is it Fool's Day? A special for you. What's it called? April Fool's Day?
April Fool's, yeah.
April Fool's Day special for you. No joke. And most importantly, Alex, thank you for your time and your expertise and everything that you bring to this industry. It's been a total pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Christy. I really enjoyed our conversation this morning.
Oh, me too. And enjoy. And I hope you get out there and start playing some music soon too.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Have a great day.
You too. See you all soon.